Good afternoon, everybody. This is Irene Weisman. Today is Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. And the topic of today is asylum. Now, I'm going to try to do something that can be talked about for probably days in about 10 minutes or so, however long it's going to take. Asylum, withholding of removal, and withholding of removal against torture. So, asylum can be affirmative or defensive. What's the difference? Affirmative asylum is filed at the administrative agency, which is USCIS. That's when somebody is not in removal proceedings, okay? You file it with the agency, and your interview is going to be at the local USCIS office that has jurisdiction over your case. Defensive asylum. Defensive asylum is submitted when somebody is in removal or deportation proceedings. Same application, just filed in immigration court, okay? What's the difference? Well, one is you are not in removal proceedings. The other one is you're in removal proceedings. When you're not in removal proceedings, and if the interview doesn't go very well, or it goes well, but the officer doesn't believe you, or they, for one reason or another, don't think you're eligible for asylum, and you're no longer in valid status, they'll refer your case to the immigration court, and your affirmative asylum is going to become defensive asylum. You'll have another chance to request asylum in front of the immigration judge. So like 2 bites at the apple. If, however, you are still in valid, lawful immigrants or non-immigrant status at the time of the decision is issued by the by USCIS, then they'll just close the case because they can't put you in removal proceedings. They don't have basis. You're still in lawful non-immigrant status. They'll close out the case, and then, should circumstances change or whatever, you can potentially apply again, okay? Now, let's talk about what is asylum. Past persecution or fear of future persecution based on at least one of the 5 grounds, okay? And these grounds are race, religion, national origin, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, okay? So the first 3, I guess, are sort of self-explanatory, right? Race, religion, national origin. Very much, self-explanatory. If you practice a certain religion and you are from a certain country, and people who practice that religion in that particular country are persecuted, doesn't matter whether you've had past persecution, you can have fear of future persecution. That's potentially could be, that's ground for asylum. Let's talk about political opinion. Political opinion is a little bit more broad. More things can be encompassed by political opinion. Sometimes it's not so straightforward. I have had cases where religion and political opinion were intertwined. Again, political opinion can be just super broad, but definitely persecution based on an individual's political opinion. Membership in a particular social group. Now, that's a really broad one. There are many classes or groups of people that can be encompassed. You have to show, this one is a difficult one, you have to show nexus, meaning that you were persecuted. The persecution was due to the fact that you're a member of that particular social group, right? Not just because it was somebody didn't like you, or, it was like the mafia trying to get you, or, somebody didn't like the hair, your hair color, or whatever, the way you spoke. It has to be all connected. You have to show that nexus. So social group is a more difficult area. There are a lot of social groups. You have to legally show a lot, to USCIS or the court, to be able to prove it. Like, it can be overbroad. You have to really narrow it and show the connection. Okay, so that's social group. Now, let's talk about the common pitfalls. Just because there is a war somewhere, just because you may be economically disadvantaged somewhere, just because there could possibly be like clan war, or again, some like mafia going at you or whatever. But the most common is war and poverty. That's not grounds for asylum, okay? And it's really the war one that gets, everybody. And I had that a lot in the last couple of years. Well, actually, I've had that a lot in the last 10 years, probably, since the war in Syria broke out. But, and then, of course, the war in Ukraine, just because there is a war somewhere, okay, in your home, not somewhere, in your home country, not ground for asylum. There has to be something else, okay? War is not ground for asylum, okay? It has to be past persecution or fear of future persecution based on at least one of the five, at least one, okay? It can be more than one, but it has to be at least one of the five, okay? And the persecution has to stem from the government, okay? Or factions that the government cannot control, okay? So, for example, you go to the police and police cannot help you because they can't control a certain entity or group of people or whatever. Then potentially that can be it. It has to stem from the government. It has to be the government's basically official sort of policy, right? It can be, and that's where the common mistake with the with the war is, in a way, especially with Ukraine. Well, it's a different country that is waging war, right? It's Russia that is waging war on Ukraine, on the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian government is trying to protect their nationals. So that's one of the reasons why it wouldn't work for asylum. But there potentially could be other grounds for nationals of that particular country. Everything is individual. Every claim has to be, again, just because you are from that particular country and many people are having a certain issue in that country doesn't mean that you're going to have that issue. Every claim for asylum is different. Every person has their own particular circumstances. It is not something that you can do on your own. It is, people do it. They're not usually successful. This is really not something that a paralegal can do for you. This is very narrow. You really have to structure your claim. You have to substantiate your claim with evidence. Okay, you have to provide evidence. You have to provide evidence that is specific to you. You have to provide evidence of country conditions. You have to tie it all to your case. Hours and hours and hours of work go into a properly prepared asylum application. Okay, it's not just that 12-page application that you put some information. Every question has a point. Okay, every question will have a meaning behind it. Very, very important. Sometimes people don't realize it. Oh, it's just forms. No, not really. It's not just forms, because within that form, each question actually has a particular meaning behind that question, and that is definitely true with the asylum application, which is, by the way, form I-589. You can go Google, Form I-589. You can look at the form, you can look at the questions, you can look into the instructions to the form, and you can see what kind of evidence they ask you to provide. But very smart idea to work with a qualified attorney who can properly represent you and who can help you to properly structure your claim, to write your statement. It is always you that should write that statement. One of the first questions that the officer or is going to ask you, who wrote your statement, who prepared your application. Okay, so very important that it comes from you. There is a lot that goes in it. Okay, and on that application, on that Form I-589, you can also request withholding of removal and withholding of removal against torture. Higher burden for those claims. Okay, usually something that the court grants, not USCIS, and higher burden of proof. Not as good as receiving asylum because it does not lead to a green card. You will need an alternative method. It is essentially a removal order, but they're not going to remove you because you receive withholding of removal, so you can stay here and have employment authorization, but you won't be able to travel, and you can't receive your green card and subsequently citizenship. So it is always better to receive asylum. But if for occasionally you can't receive asylum, let's talk about the common pitfalls why you can't receive asylum. Now, what I'm going to say right now is very, very, very important. You must submit your request for asylum within 1 year of your last entry to the United States. Okay, 1 year of your last entry. There are very few exceptions to this rule. Okay, ineffective assistance of counsel or exceptional circumstances. What can fall into exceptional circumstances? An illness, okay, severe illness, maybe severe mental problems, but sometimes it can really be a physical illness. I've had that actually happen before, just because you didn't know about it, or you forgot, or you didn't know asylum existed. Not an excuse. Okay, so a person can have an excellent claim, okay, but they've missed that 1 year, they're not out, and they don't fit within the exception. They will not have a claim for asylum, but they could be eligible for withholding, and that may work for for that particular individual. So again, that's another reason why you should talk about it with an experienced attorney, because they'll be able to assess that for you. Very, very important rule, that 1 year, okay, extremely important. Okay, of course, and as I said, there's just so much more to discuss when it comes to asylum, but these are the a 10-minute gist into asylum. And again, I'm gonna probably tomorrow I will do the same identical segment in Russian, just so that we have this in both English and Russian, and potentially I'll start recording the videos in both languages and then post both, so that we have it for for my audience that does not necessarily speak English or doesn't speak English well enough. Okay, so unless we have some major news, I'm going to try to do the same segment in Russian tomorrow. But that's it for today, everybody. Have a good and safe evening, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.